The easiest person to overlook is often the one who changed someone's life forever. The Atlantic breeze carried the scent of salt and fresh flowers across the oceanfront resort as guests in elegant designer suits and shimmering dresses gathered beneath a white floral arch overlooking the water. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. A string quartet rehearsed softly near the ceremony aisle, and conversations drifted through the air about successful businesses, luxury vacations, and prestigious universities. Every detail reflected months of careful planning, from the perfectly trimmed hedges to the ivory chairs arranged in flawless rows facing the sea. Near the entrance, however, stood a woman who seemed almost invisible to everyone around her. Vanessa Brooks quietly held a small bouquet of wildflowers tied together with a simple blue ribbon that she had arranged herself before leaving home that morning. Her navy dress was neat and elegant without trying to compete with the expensive fashion surrounding her, and her comfortable shoes carried traces of sand from the short walk across the beach parking area. She smiled politely each time another guest walked past, yet no one paused long enough to return the greeting. A valet assumed she was waiting for someone else. Two guests stepped in front of her while taking photographs without realizing she had already been standing there. A photographer politely asked her to move a few feet to the side so the family portraits would not include someone he believed was unrelated to the wedding party. Vanessa simply nodded and thanked him with genuine kindness before stepping aside without a trace of resentment. She looked toward the ceremony space with quiet admiration, noticing the careful attention given to every flower, every ribbon, and every smiling face. The happiness surrounding the celebration mattered far more to her than where she happened to be standing. Moments later, the wedding coordinator hurried toward the front rows while checking a clipboard filled with guest names and seating assignments. She noticed Vanessa standing near the aisle and offered a courteous smile. "I am sorry, ma'am. Those seats are reserved for immediate family and honored guests. Could I ask you to wait near the back until we confirm your invitation?" Her voice remained respectful, yet the assumption behind the question settled gently into the silence between them. Vanessa lowered her eyes for only a moment before answering with calm grace that surprised even the coordinator. "Of course, I do not want to inconvenience anyone." Without another word, she walked toward the last row of chairs overlooking the ocean, carefully protecting the small bouquet in her hands from the breeze. Around her, conversations continued uninterrupted. A few guests briefly glanced in her direction before returning to discussions about stock markets, destination weddings, and expensive honeymoon plans. No one wondered why she had arrived carrying flowers instead of gifts wrapped in elegant paper. No one asked whether she knew the bride or the groom. To nearly everyone present, she was simply another unfamiliar face who had somehow wandered into a celebration where she did not appear to belong. Vanessa quietly took her place near the back, folded her hands over the bouquet, and watched the waves rolling gently toward the shore, unaware that before the ceremony could begin, every eye in the entire wedding would eventually turn toward the woman almost everyone had chosen not to see. Vanessa Brooks remained in the last row with the small bouquet resting gently across her lap, while the soft sound of the ocean blended with quiet conversations that floated through the wedding venue. She had long ago learned that dignity did not depend on where someone was invited to sit. It came from the choices a person made when no one was paying attention. At 39 years old, Vanessa had spent nearly 2 decades teaching music at a public elementary school in a working-class neighborhood several miles inland. Every weekday morning, she unlocked the classroom before sunrise, arranged well-worn instruments donated by former students, and greeted every child with the same encouraging smile regardless of their background or family income. Many of her students had arrived carrying burdens far heavier than backpacks, and she believed that music could sometimes reach a heart before words ever could. 20 years earlier, one quiet little boy had entered her classroom after losing his mother to a long illness. He rarely looked anyone in the eye. He spoke only when necessary and often remained alone while other children laughed together during recess. Vanessa never forced conversations. Instead, she placed a small piano keyboard near the classroom window and invited him to play whenever he felt ready. Week after week, she stayed after school without asking for extra pay, patiently teaching him simple melodies that slowly became songs of confidence instead of sadness. When he doubted himself, She reminded him that the strongest people were not always the loudest people. When he believed his future had already been decided by hardship, she quietly told him that character could carry a person farther than circumstances ever could. She celebrated every small achievement with genuine pride because she understood that lasting confidence was built one moment at a time. Long after he graduated from her classroom, birthday cards occasionally arrived in the mail. Christmas letters described academic scholarships, college acceptance, and new opportunities. Vanessa saved every handwritten note inside a small wooden box beside old recital programs and faded classroom photographs. She never expected recognition in return for the countless afternoons she had devoted to helping children believe in themselves. Watching them build meaningful lives had always been enough. That was why she had accepted the wedding invitation with quiet gratitude instead of excitement. She had chosen wildflowers because she remembered how the young man once told her they reminded him that beautiful things did not need to be expensive to matter. She carried no expensive gift because she knew he valued memories more than luxury. Around her, guests continued discussing investment portfolios, vacation homes, and exclusive country clubs, while servers carried polished trays filled with sparkling lemonade and elegant appetizers. Vanessa simply admired the happiness surrounding the celebration and silently hoped the bride and groom would enjoy a lifetime filled with the same kindness she had always encouraged inside her classroom. She did not notice that several members of the wedding party hurried across the venue carrying nervous expressions. The ceremony was already running behind schedule because the groom had made one unexpected request before he agreed to walk down the aisle. He had quietly asked a single question that no one in the room seemed prepared to answer. "Has Ms. Brooks arrived yet?" The quiet question from behind the bridal suite doors spread through the wedding staff far more quickly than anyone expected, yet the answer remained the same every time someone checked the guest list. No one could find a reserved seat under the name Ms. Brooks. The wedding coordinator reviewed every printed page again, convinced that an important detail had somehow been overlooked. Meanwhile, outside beneath the white canopy facing the Atlantic Ocean, the celebration continued with effortless elegance. Guests admired the breathtaking floral arrangements, complimented one another on tailored suits and designer gowns, and compared stories about successful companies, international travel, and private golf clubs. The conversations reflected lives built upon opportunity and privilege, creating an invisible wall between those who seemed to belong and anyone who appeared different. Vanessa Brooks sat quietly in the final row, gently smoothing the ribbon around the bouquet resting in her hands. She watched a young flower girl struggle to keep the petals inside a small wicker basket after a playful gust of wind scattered them across the stone walkway. Without drawing attention to herself, Vanessa stood, gathered every flower with patient care, and returned the basket with a warm smile that immediately eased the little girl's worried expression. The child's mother accepted the basket with a polite "thank you" before instinctively turning back toward another conversation, never asking the woman who had helped for her name. Moments later, an elderly gentleman searched every pocket of his jacket with growing concern after misplacing his reading glasses. Vanessa quietly noticed them resting on the chair beside him and handed them back before he realized where they had been all along. He smiled gratefully, thanked her, and rejoined his table without another thought. Small acts of kindness continued to appear wherever she happened to be standing, almost as naturally as the ocean breeze itself, yet each one disappeared into the celebration without leaving a lasting impression. Across the venue, several members of the bride's extended family noticed Vanessa for the first time. One quietly assumed she must have been hired to assist guests. Another wondered whether she belonged to the catering company, because her dress appeared far simpler than the luxury fashion surrounding them. No one spoke with cruelty. Their assumptions arrived softly, wrapped inside comfortable confidence and unconscious bias rather than open hostility. Vanessa sensed the lingering glances but refused to let them disturb her peace. Years spent teaching children had shown her that many people judged quickly simply because they had never learned to look carefully. She chose compassion over embarrassment and continued appreciating the happiness surrounding the wedding instead of dwelling on herself. At the same time, inside a private room overlooking the ocean, the groom remained unexpectedly calm despite the delayed ceremony. Family members assured him that every guest had arrived, and that everything was finally ready. He smiled politely before asking exactly the same question once again. "Please look one more time. I will not begin until Ms. Brooks is here." The room fell strangely quiet. A groomsman volunteered to search the property personally, while another checked with the hospitality staff. None of them imagined that the woman the groom refused to celebrate without had been sitting peacefully only a few rows away all along, overlooked not because she was absent, but because almost everyone had decided who she must be before anyone cared enough to discover who she truly was. The search quietly expanded across the oceanfront resort while the guests remained unaware that the ceremony had paused for a reason none of them could imagine. Wedding attendants checked the reception hall, the garden terrace, the bridal lounge, and even the parking area, each returning with the same uncertain expression. They insisted that every important guest had already arrived, yet the groom calmly repeated that someone essential was still missing. Outside, Vanessa Brooks remained seated in the final row, enjoying the peaceful rhythm of the waves as sunlight shimmered across the water. She never considered that the delay could have anything to do with her. To her, this day belonged entirely to the young couple whose happiness she had quietly celebrated from the moment she received the invitation. When a small boy nervously struggled to fasten the tiny bow tie around his neck before walking down the aisle, Vanessa knelt beside him with a reassuring smile and carefully adjusted the fabric until it rested perfectly beneath his collar. His worried face brightened immediately, and he thanked her with the sincerity only a child could offer before running back toward his family. His parents smiled politely from a distance, assuming she was simply another helpful member of the event staff. A few moments later, the bride's elderly grandmother hesitated near the stone pathway, uncertain whether she had reached the correct seating section. Vanessa gently offered her arm and walked with her at an easy pace until she reached the reserved family row. The grandmother thanked her warmly and remarked that kindness seemed increasingly rare. Vanessa simply answered that kindness usually appeared when people slowed down long enough to notice one another. Before either woman could continue the conversation, another relative approached and escorted the grandmother away without asking who Vanessa was or why she seemed to know exactly how to care for everyone around her. The wedding coordinator soon returned carrying her clipboard once again. With genuine courtesy, she explained that the ceremony would begin shortly and suggested that Vanessa move even farther toward the back because photographers preferred unobstructed views of the aisle during the processional. Vanessa smiled softly, gathered her bouquet of wildflowers, and stepped aside without hesitation. She thanked the coordinator for letting her know and quietly settled near a shaded stone wall overlooking the ocean. Several guests noticed the exchange, but interpreted it as confirmation that the modestly dressed black woman was not truly part of the celebration. Their assumptions spread silently through exchanged glances rather than spoken words, creating distance without open confrontation. Inside the bridal suite, the groom finally stood and straightened his jacket as another groomsman hurried through the door. He reported that every ballroom, every terrace, and every guest list had already been checked. The groom listened carefully before asking one unexpected question. Did anyone look beyond the reserved seating? The room fell silent again. A thoughtful expression crossed the wedding coordinator's face as she replayed every interaction from the past hour inside her memory. Suddenly, she remembered the gracious woman carrying a simple bouquet who had never complained after being moved farther away from the ceremony. Her heartbeat quickened as she realized that the quiet guest everyone had overlooked might be exactly the person the groom had been searching for all along. The wedding coordinator walked quickly across the stone terrace, her eyes searching every corner with new urgency instead of quiet routine. For the first time that afternoon, she was no longer looking for a missing name on a printed seating chart. She was looking for a woman whose kindness she had remembered only after replaying every moment inside her mind. Near the edge of the courtyard, beneath the gentle shade of a flowering magnolia tree, Vanessa Brooks remained peacefully seated with her bouquet resting across her lap as she watched sunlight dance across the Atlantic Ocean. She smiled softly at the distant laughter of children chasing bubbles across the lawn, completely unaware that nearly the entire wedding schedule now revolved around finding her. The coordinator approached carefully, her expression filled with uncertainty. "Excuse me, Miss Brooks?" she asked quietly. Vanessa looked up with the same warm smile she had offered everyone else throughout the afternoon. Yes, she answered. Relief immediately crossed the coordinator's face. The groom has been asking for you. He has asked about you several times, and he has delayed the ceremony because he believes you have not arrived. Vanessa blinked with gentle surprise before looking toward the white ceremony arch standing beside the ocean. There must be some misunderstanding, she replied with humble sincerity. I have been here the entire time. The coordinator lowered her eyes for a brief moment as the full meaning of those words settled upon her heart. She suddenly remembered asking Vanessa to leave the front seating area, suggesting that she move farther back, and never once asking why she had been invited. Before she could apologize, another wedding assistant hurried over to confirm that the groom had refused to begin until Ms. Brooks was personally escorted to the ceremony. Around them, several nearby guests quietly overheard the conversation. Confused expressions slowly replaced confident assumptions as whispers spread from one row of chairs to another. The elegantly dressed couple who had earlier mistaken Vanessa for event staff exchanged embarrassed glances. The photographer who had politely asked her to step out of family photographs lowered his camera without saying a word. Even the valet recognized the woman he had assumed was simply waiting outside. No one had spoken with cruelty, yet each small assumption now returned with unexpected weight. Vanessa remained remarkably calm. She stood, carefully brushed a few grains of sand from the hem of her navy dress, and gently straightened the blue ribbon around her bouquet. Please do not worry, she told the coordinator with genuine kindness. Today should be remembered for joy. Her quiet grace made the coordinator's regret even deeper. At that same moment, inside the bridal suite overlooking the ocean, the groom glanced once more toward the ceremony entrance before taking a slow breath. A member of the wedding party finally appeared in the doorway with an emotional smile and gave a single reassuring nod. Without asking another question, the groom smiled with visible relief. Outside, the soft melody from the string quartet gradually faded as guests instinctively turned toward the back of the venue. Every conversation stopped. Every eye followed the same direction. The woman almost everyone had overlooked only minutes earlier was now being respectfully escorted toward the ceremony aisle, while an unexpected silence settled over the celebration, as though the entire wedding had quietly realized that the most important guest had never been missing at all. Vanessa Brooks walked slowly beside the wedding coordinator, her modest bouquet resting gently in her hands as the warm afternoon sunlight painted long golden reflections across the ocean. The cheerful conversations that had filled the venue only moments earlier had faded into complete silence. Every guest watched her with new curiosity, yet Vanessa kept the same peaceful expression she had worn since arriving. She neither hurried nor hesitated. Years spent guiding children through moments of uncertainty had taught her that calmness often carried greater strength than explanation. The coordinator quietly apologized as they walked. Ms. Brooks, I should have asked who you were instead of assuming. I am truly sorry. Vanessa offered a gentle smile that immediately eased the younger woman's embarrassment. We all make quick decisions sometimes, she replied softly. What matters is whether we are willing to see people differently afterward. Those simple words lingered in the quiet air far longer than either woman expected. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and fresh roses through the ceremony space as the string quartet lowered their instruments and waited. Even the children, who had been whispering and laughing only minutes earlier, became unusually still. It felt as though the entire celebration had paused to breathe. Vanessa glanced toward the endless blue horizon where gentle waves rose and disappeared without leaving a trace. They reminded her of the countless students who had entered her classroom carrying fear, grief, loneliness, or doubt before slowly discovering hope they never realized already lived inside them. She never remembered them by grades or awards. She remembered the first genuine smile after months of silence, the first confident performance before nervous parents, the first time a child believed that tomorrow could become brighter than yesterday. Those moments had always been her greatest reward. As she approached the ceremony aisle, she noticed several guests lowering their eyes with quiet humility. The photographer who had asked her to move earlier now stepped respectfully aside, without raising his camera. The elderly gentleman whose glasses she had found smiled warmly with grateful recognition. The little flower girl waved enthusiastically, unaware that she had become part of something much larger than a wedding. Vanessa smiled back with the same kindness she had shown everyone throughout the afternoon. She carried no resentment inside her heart because she understood that forgiveness often began long before an apology was spoken. Near the front rows, the bride's grandmother slowly stood before anyone else did. She looked directly at Vanessa and nodded with deep respect, silently acknowledging the grace she had witnessed throughout the day. One by one, other guests instinctively followed her example, not because anyone instructed them to stand, but because something inside them quietly insisted that they should. No announcement explained what was happening. No speech asked for recognition. The moment unfolded naturally, almost like the tide responding to the pull of the moon. Vanessa paused for a brief second, humbled by the unexpected gesture, then continued walking with quiet dignity. Behind the closed doors of the bridal suite, the groom finally heard the gentle movement of chairs and the distant sound of people rising together. A peaceful smile crossed his face before he even stepped outside because he knew, without anyone saying a single word, that the woman who had taught him the meaning of character had finally been seen for who she truly was. The doors of the bridal suite opened at last, and the groom stepped into the warm afternoon sunlight with quiet confidence instead of ceremony. His tailored tuxedo reflected the elegance of the celebration, yet his attention never drifted toward the breathtaking floral arch or the hundreds of smiling guests waiting beside the ocean. The moment he reached the beginning of the aisle, his eyes searched only for one familiar face. They found Vanessa Brooks standing quietly beside the front row, still holding the small bouquet of wildflowers with the same humble grace she had carried throughout the afternoon. A genuine smile spread across his face, brighter than the sunlight dancing across the Atlantic behind them. Without hesitation, he stepped away from the aisle and walked directly toward her. The guests watched in complete silence as he crossed the distance that no seating chart or social expectation had been able to erase. When he finally reached Vanessa, he gently embraced her with the affection of a grateful son greeting the person who had helped shape his life. Vanessa smiled warmly, surprised but deeply moved, and rested one hand lightly against his shoulder. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The quiet itself carried more meaning than applause ever could. Finally, the groom stepped back and looked at the gathered guests before speaking in a calm, steady voice. "Before I marry the woman I love, there is someone every person here deserves to know." I remained fixed upon him. Many of you know my career. Many of you know my business. Some of you know my accomplishments. Very few of you know how close I came to believing I would never become any of those things. He turned toward Vanessa with unmistakable gratitude. When I was a frightened little boy after losing my mother, this remarkable teacher stayed after school week after week because she believed I was worth her time. She never asked for recognition. She never expected anything in return. She simply believed that kindness could change a life. A gentle breeze carried his words across the silent ceremony. Every lesson she gave me reached far beyond music. She taught me that character matters more than status, that compassion is stronger than pride, and that every person deserves to be seen before they are judged. The opportunities one have today began in a classroom where one teacher refused to let a grieving child believe he had been forgotten. Vanessa lowered her eyes, humbled by the unexpected praise, while several guests quietly wiped tears from their faces. The groom smiled gently before continuing. "When we planned this wedding, there was only one guest whose presence I could not imagine celebrating without. I asked that she be seated among those closest to me because that is exactly where she belongs. If that did not happen today, then that mistake belongs to all of us, not to her." The words settled gently over the gathering without accusation, allowing every listener to examine their own heart in silence. Then he extended his arm toward Vanessa with deep respect. "Ms. Brooks, would you do me the greatest honor of walking with me to the front? Long before anyone called me successful, you helped me become a good man. That will always be the achievement I value most." Vanessa looked into his grateful eyes, smiled through quiet emotion, and accepted his arm as the entire gathering remained standing, no longer seeing an overlooked guest, but the extraordinary woman whose quiet kindness had shaped the very man they had all come to celebrate. Vanessa Brooks accepted the groom's arm with quiet humility, and together they walked the remaining steps toward the front of the ceremony, while the afternoon sun cast a warm golden light across the ocean. No applause interrupted the moment because none was needed. The silence itself carried respect that words could never fully express. As they reached the front row, the bride stepped forward with a gentle smile and embraced Vanessa before taking her hands. "Thank you," she said softly. "Long before I met the man I love, you helped him become the person standing beside me today." Vanessa smiled with sincere warmth. "He made those choices himself," she answered. "I only reminded him that kindness is always worth choosing." The bride's eyes filled with gratitude as she carefully accepted the small bouquet of wildflowers. "These are more beautiful than any flowers we ordered," she whispered, "because they came with love." Nearby, the wedding coordinator slowly approached Vanessa, her voice trembling with honest regret. "I owe you an apology. I looked at your clothes, your quiet nature, and where you were standing instead of asking who you were. I made assumptions that I should never have made." Vanessa gently placed one hand over the young woman's hands before she could continue. "Then today has already become a valuable lesson," she replied kindly. "An apology means little unless it changes how we see the next person we meet. I believe yours will." The coordinator nodded with grateful relief, her eyes reflecting both embarrassment and renewed understanding. One by one, other guests quietly approached. The photographer admitted that he had asked her to step away from family photographs without realizing she was one of the most important people there. The valet apologized for overlooking her when she first arrived. The elegantly dressed couple who had mistaken her for a member of the event staff confessed that they had judged her before exchanging even a single conversation. None of them received anger in return. Vanessa answered every apology with the same calm grace that had guided her throughout the afternoon. "We all carry invisible stories," she said gently. "Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another person is the chance to tell theirs before we decide who they are." Those simple words settled deeply into every heart listening nearby. Even the bride's parents, whose attention had remained fixed on creating a flawless celebration, walked forward with quiet humility. The bride's father extended his hand respectfully. "Ms. Brooks, we spent months planning every detail of this wedding, but somehow we nearly overlooked the person who helped make this marriage possible. Thank you for giving our future son-in-law the kind of character that no amount of success can purchase." Vanessa accepted his handshake with genuine warmth. "Character grows through many hands," she answered. "His mother planted the first seeds. I simply watered what she began." The groom looked at her with deep admiration, recognizing that even now she refused to claim credit for herself. The officiant waited patiently, allowing every moment to unfold without interruption because everyone present understood that something greater than a wedding schedule had quietly taken place. The celebration had become a reminder that true honor is never measured by wealth, appearance, or social standing. It is revealed by the quiet influence a compassionate heart leaves upon the lives of others, often long before anyone notices its lasting impact. The ceremony finally began beneath a sky painted with the soft colors of late afternoon, and everything that followed felt quieter, warmer, and more meaningful than anyone had imagined only an hour earlier. As the bride and groom exchanged their vows beside the ocean, every promise seemed to carry a deeper understanding that love was never built upon appearance, reputation, or success alone. It was built upon the countless unseen acts of kindness that shaped a person's heart long before the world noticed. Vanessa Brooks remained seated in the place the groom had personally chosen for her, close enough to witness every smile and every joyful tear. The small bouquet of wildflowers now rested beside the bride, a simple reminder that the most meaningful gifts often arrived without a high price tag. When the ceremony concluded and the newly married couple walked back down the aisle together, they paused before reaching the reception lawn. The groom turned once more toward Vanessa, smiled with the same gratitude that had filled his eyes since childhood, and quietly mouthed two simple words. "Thank you." Vanessa answered with a gentle nod, knowing that nothing more needed to be said. As evening settled across the coastline, strings of warm lights illuminated the reception while the sound of laughter blended with gentle waves rolling onto the shore. Yet something had changed among the guests. Conversations that had once revolved around accomplishments and status now carried unexpected warmth. People introduced themselves to strangers before asking what they did for a living. They listened more carefully than they had earlier that afternoon. The photographer made certain to capture several heartfelt photographs of Vanessa laughing with the bride's grandmother and the flower girl. The wedding coordinator personally invited Vanessa to the head table during dinner, not out of obligation, but from genuine respect. The bride's parents asked if they could visit Vanessa's classroom someday to donate new musical instruments for her students, inspired by the quiet influence one dedicated teacher had carried for so many years. Vanessa accepted their generosity only after asking that every child, regardless of family income, be given the same opportunity to learn. Later that evening, as the celebration gradually drew to a close, Vanessa slipped away from the reception without seeking attention. She had never measured the importance of a day by how many people remembered her face. She measured it by whether someone left with a kinder heart than when they arrived. Before reaching the parking area, she paused for one final look at the reception glowing beside the ocean. Through the distance, she could see the bride and groom dancing beneath thousands of tiny lights, while family and friends surrounded them with genuine happiness. The breeze gently lifted a few loose strands of her hair, carrying the familiar scent of salt water and fresh flowers across the quiet evening. She smiled to herself, grateful not because she had finally been recognized, but because understanding had quietly replaced assumption inside so many hearts. Then she turned toward her modest car and drove home beneath a sky filled with early stars, knowing that on Monday morning another classroom full of children would be waiting for her gentle encouragement. Somewhere among those young faces might be another child searching for hope, another future leader needing someone to believe in them before they believed in themselves. Long after the music faded, the flowers wilted, and the elegant decorations were packed away, the greatest memory carried home from that wedding was not the breathtaking ocean view or the beautiful ceremony. It was the quiet truth that the strongest lives are often shaped by the kindest people, and the people the world overlooks today may become the very reason someone shines tomorrow.